exactly. So, but then that got me thinking, Yuval, if you don't mind me asking you this. So then it got me thinking, well, the question was about, should we treat the Earth as a resource? And perhaps simplistically, I feel as a biologist compelled to say, well, of course, the Earth is a resource to all other organisms. But do they exhibit moderation? Is moderation built into nature? And then by extension of your initial argument, why, we shouldn't have to extend moderation to nature, should we? Because whatever we want, therefore, is natural, no?
I mean, in some systems are in equilibrium or in homeostasis, and you do see moderation in a way built into them, and some systems are not. They're completely out of balance, completely out of control. So again, here too, you can't just say something which should be true of all natural phenomena. You have a huge variety. But I think what really makes it complicated at this point in history and makes all these questions far more complicated is that we are on the verge, perhaps, of creating the first inorganic life forms. After 4 billion years of evolution, it's a very, very long time, 4 billion years. And we've seen so many different types of organisms, but actually we've seen just one type of life. All of life, from amoebas and dinosaurs to us and to tomatoes, it's just organic biochemistry. That's it. And we are now on the verge, perhaps, of creating the first inorganic life forms. And on the one hand, it strengthens this feeling that we are doing something unnatural, even though this is not the case. We are perhaps just extending life to more natural realms, but also raises the question of responsibility, of what would be the consequences of what we are doing now. If you think about previous religions and previous regimes in history, whether Stalin or whether the Nazis or whatever, no matter what they did, in the end, you could always go back to the human body, to basic human biology. It's like a computer game that you go in the wrong direction and you die and you come back and you start again. And now, for the first time in history, political regimes, human ideologies, human mythologies have the potential to really shift the evolution of life and to even place it on a completely new path. And you can imagine a 21st century totalitarian regime, a 21st century Stalin, that, Stalin worked mainly with social engineering. He maybe wanted to re-engineer human biology, but he couldn't. He dreamt about creating a new man, a new human, the new Soviet, but he only had social engineering. So in the end, when the Soviet Union collapsed, you still have human beings, like they were in 1917. And we start again. In the 21st century, a new Stalin might have the ability first to really re-engineer the body down to the level of DNA and create new human species, and perhaps even to create completely inorganic life forms. So we can imagine millions of years of a new evolutionary track beginning with some 21st century Stalin. And this is extremely frightening, especially because these kinds of people, they think in extremes. I talk a lot with scientists who are developing these technologies, whether it's CRISPR and genetic engineering, whether it's AI. And most of these people, they think not only in beneficial terms, but also in very narrow terms. Like, I'm doing my research in order to help cure Parkinson's disease. It's a leap of the imagination to think, what would the worst politician on earth do with the technologies that I'm developing? But as a historian, rather than as a biologist or as a computer scientist, this is the way my mind thinks. When somebody tells me how they are now using CRISPR to try and overcome Parkinson, I think, what would Stalin have done with it?
Jump in, Slavoj.
Please, because so wonderful. Now we are moving finally into, apart from this platitude, nature, we are all this, more interesting. These are the crucial questions. First, do you know, Yuval, just to tell you this, I learned from some collection of texts, ideological debates, and practical experiments. You know that Stalin tried already to do this. In the late 20s, Stalin was convinced by some stupid biologists that with some machinations, I don't know how, to create a perfect worker which can read, write elementarily, but is too stupid to organize socially, to rebel, by coupling humans and apes. And they tried to do it. She sent a delegation to Congo. They import about 30 gorillas, I think, apes, and typical male chauvinism, women apes.
Of course.
And they, what can we do? That, and then they selected 4 very strong Russian, strong farmer men. They made them copulate. Okay, it didn't work. And then,
well, I was going to say, and that's how I came to be a biologist.
Yeah. And then Stalin had to discover that this scientist was really a British spy, you know the story. And but what I'm saying is that Stalin was already, forget about so-called egalitarianism of communism. What egalitarianism? Stalin was the first who consciously tried to create a specific race of workers who just work with modest, shitty food without protest and so